What's going on, everybody? Shinobi here, and in this video, we're going to talk about how to improve any video game or life skill when you've hit a wall or you feel like your skills have stopped growing. This is also going to accelerate anyone's skill growth, even if they haven't plateaued. I'll cover multiple strategies for skill improvement to ensure that you find something that works for you. I'll be playing Fortnite Zero Build gameplay in the background and using Fortnite examples, but these improvement methods will pretty much work for any game or life skill. This video is more of a podcast style, so feel free to pop some headphones in and get some chores done. Or watch the video for outstanding gameplay. If you really like this video, please give it a thumbs up or share it with a friend. Now, I aim to provide massive value throughout the whole video, and I don't want to waste any of your time, but I am going to get a bit meta at times because I think it's important to understand the why. So stick with me while I give you an overview on how to grow skills much quicker and achieve your desired goals, both in video games and in life. First off, from a mindset point of view, it's important to be humble and lose your ego when trying to improve at something. When you truly accept your current skill level and you're realistic about it, you allow yourself to improve faster. This is because you let down those barriers to learning that previously existed to protect your ego and your self-confidence. You see, most of us attach our proficiency in a skill to our self-esteem, which means that when we're bad at it, we start judging ourselves and become worried about what others think of us as a person. And the closer that skill is related to our self-identity, the more it messes with our confidence and distracts us from our learning. So if you call yourself a gamer and you suck at a game, it can be really painful and sometimes embarrassing. And if you allow that to become the main thought process and put yourself in a constant state of worry, you will practically learn nothing. In most cases, when we're bad at something that we care about, we find excuses for our performance, or we create ways to shield ourselves from the idea of being subpar or having others think we're subpar. Instead of facing the facts and analyzing where we could improve, we blame external factors like lag, cheating opponents, players who have never touched grass, or just plain bad luck. But if we're being real with ourselves, none of those explanations have ever helped us improve our gameplay. In fact, they do the opposite. They rob us of the chance to self-analyze in order to learn and grow our skills. Think about it. Every time you deflect responsibility for a loss, you're missing out on valuable lessons that could make you better at what you do. So try to always be asking yourself, what could I have done better? If you watch any of my live streams, you'll know that this is a habit of mine. I'm almost always blaming myself for the loss and looking for things I could have done better. Many people think I'm beating myself up, but in reality, I am dropping the ego and trying to learn from my losses. A book I'll recommend on this mentality is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. The truth is, it's always your fault in some way. So on the note of ego, it's okay to suck or be mediocre at something. Just don't tie your self-worth to it. One of my favorite quotes that you may have heard me recite, and it's in my Shinobi FFA map, is every black belt is just a white belt who never gave up. Remember that the best players you've ever seen were once in your position at some point in their journey. But usually the difference is they dropped the ego and put in the work to allow themselves to grow faster. My students who have shown the most growth are those who realistically acknowledge their skill level and they don't try to convince themselves or others otherwise. Instead, they're fully focused on growth and learning. They don't waste time judging or making excuses. They're the ones who love critical feedback and brutal honesty. They don't go into master training scrimmages comparing themselves or worrying about what others think of them. They go in with a learning mindset and drop the ego. They're often the ones who go into scrimmages of higher skill level than them and enjoy getting brutalized by better players. And that's because they aren't concerned about their personal feelings. They're concerned about how to beat that type of player or learn how to play like that type of player. For them, it's like a high intensity learning session. And for others who struggle with ego, it's like a traumatic emotional experience. You see the difference now? And that brings me to my final thought about mentality. You need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I cannot overstate the importance of this idea. There's a lot of science and research around this idea that I won't get into for the sake of time, but basically challenging yourself and feeling uncomfortable or frustrated is actually the fastest way to learn and create new neural connections through neuroplasticity. Ultimately, if you're training and you feel frustrated by not being able to keep up or do something efficiently, your brain will later go into overdrive while you sleep in order to create connections to help you overcome the challenge. This is just another reason why sleep is so important. So if you aren't feeling challenged by your training, you should find a way to make things harder or push yourself further. And I'd encourage you to take on this mindset with life as well. If you aren't challenging yourself on a regular basis, you are stagnating. Pushing yourself to overcome challenges is one of the most rewarding experiences in life and allows you to reach the top of the mountain step by step and look down at your journey with a smile. It gives you a huge amount of confidence and allows you to adopt the idea that you can do anything when you put your mind to it. Gaining different skills in any form and overcoming challenges makes you a more confident person and a better learner overall. I attribute a lot of my ability to learn quickly to the fact that I have a very wide skill set in many different areas, and I've had a lot of different career paths. I've always challenged myself to be learning something new at all times, and I've adopted a student of life mentality. It's honestly a life-changing mindset and a core reason that I know I'll be successful wherever I go. Okay, now it's time for putting growth tactics into place. Apart from mindset, improving at anything is actually pretty simple, and there's been a lot of research done around the subject. I highly recommend reading or listening to the book Peak by Anders Ericsson if you're interested in learning how the greatest performers master their skills. And a big thank you to whoever recommended me this book in a YouTube comment. The secret to improving at anything at a much faster rate is really just two things. Number one, it's determining your weakness or the skill that will have the most impact on your improvement. The second step is determining the best way to practice that individual skill with focused intent for a long time until you've mastered it. That's putting things pretty simply, and we'll cover ways to go about this, but just think of it as building your house of mastery brick by brick. It's methodical, systemized, and it's pretty simple. It just takes time and intense focus. Okay, so let's start off with how to determine what skill to work on. But before we get into it, I'd quickly ask you to hit that like button if you're enjoying the video so far. It's free and it literally takes half of a second. Thank you, my friend. Oh, and if you play Fortnite, use code Toby1Shinobi in your item shop. All right. Let's get back to it. So in order to figure out what skill you need to work on, you have to figure out where you need to improve. This could be a certain weakness in your gameplay, or this could be the fundamental skills that have the biggest influence on your success in the game. In shooters, these are things like aim, movement, and actions per minute. When you determine what to work on, you need to do your best to narrow it down to a singular skill that can be trained, analyzed, and hopefully measured. So instead of just saying you need to improve your movement mechanics and then jumping into custom game lobbies and just playing like normal, you instead need to pick out one movement skill or technique and then force yourself to do it for an hour and a half straight in a creative lobby, practicing nothing but that technique in every fight without any ego about losing your fights and being judged. Now, if you know an exact skill to work on, you are already ahead of most players and half your problem is solved, because most players have a general idea of what to work on, but they don't get specific enough to make significant gains. The second part of the formula is that you now have to come up with a way to practice this single thing with great intent. This is often called purposeful practice, and it's the difference between two violinists who both have 10,000 hours playing, but one of them spent half their time working on specific techniques by themselves over and over. The musician who practiced single skills in isolation, aka the boring stuff, is always much further ahead than the ones who spent 10,000 hours playing in an orchestra, with friends, or with a teacher. These musicians who practice in isolation are always the ones being selected for the most renowned international orchestras. So let's jump into figuring out how to determine what skill we need to work on next to break out of our plateau or improve faster. I'll provide you with a few methods to try out to see what works best for you, and there are also plenty of other methods or combinations that can work as well. Do whatever you find works best for you, but I highly recommend getting in the habit of recording your own gameplay and analyzing it closely. For the first method, let's start with the simple self-analysis. This is done by recording your own gameplay, preferably in chunks longer than a minute, to get a better scope of what is going on. I use OBS replay buffer, and I always have the ability to save the last 25 minutes of gameplay footage. NVIDIA Shadowplay is very similar, and consoles usually have a long recording time option if you start recording before a game starts. Consoles usually have a short replay buffer option also that you can use to capture small smaller clips after they happen. You could also prop your phone up and record your screen in low quality if you are so desperate. When reviewing your gameplay, you have to do it through an unbiased and analytical lens. You can't make excuses for yourself. Instead, you should watch it as if you're watching someone else and you want to offer them as much critical feedback as possible. A really powerful technique is to slow the footage down to about 25% speed and analyze during critical moments like fights that you lose or fumble in some way. This gives you a lot more understanding of what is actually happening and helps you see more things to work on or opportunities that you may have missed. Now get your notepad out and start writing down issues that you're seeing. Keep listing issues and write at least 10 things down. These could be the exact same issues repeated over and over again, and if it is, that's great because those are things that are definitely causing major problems. Now look through your list and pick out the one that you think if you mastered would make a significant difference in your gameplay. Maybe it's a decision-making thing like you're not using enough cover, or maybe it's a mechanical skill issue like you're jumping too much in fights and making yourself an easy target, etc. But try to go deeper with the analysis and don't just chalk it up to bad aim unless you really aren't hitting anything. Trust me, that is what 90% of people chalk things up to, but trust me, in shooters, if your fights are close, it's usually not solely an aim issue. It's usually a decision-making issue like using cover more often or taking a better position. Alright, now the second method to figure out what to work on is to watch better players in slow motion at a quarter speed during their fights or critical moments and then compare your own gameplay to theirs. What is it that they are doing in fights that you aren't doing all the time? Do they have tendencies that they revert to in every fight that you just aren't doing? Is there anything else besides their mechanical ability that makes them different from you in most fights? A third way to figure out what skill to work on is by playing with or against higher skilled players, preferably in custom lobbies where there aren't really any stakes other than damaged ego. I'm going to use Fortnite as an example. If you play against players who are much better than you in custom lobbies inside Fortnite, you can analyze each of your deaths and try to determine what it is that is making it so hard for you to kill them or get an advantage on them. You can record a short clip of every single one of your deaths and save it to watch later, and then write down what you're consistently seeing. Things you could have done better against them, or things that seem to make a huge difference that they're using against you. Just a note, playing against much better players will hurt, but it's often the fastest way to improve in general. It puts you in a frustrated state, and if you can use it as a learning experience, a lot of neuroplasticity can take place while you rest. Back in my Halo Reach days, I used to practice in custom games with semi-pro players. I played with these players regularly for about an entire month, and I was getting absolutely demolished. It got to a point where I just set aside the ego and I said, you know what? I know and they know that they are much better than me, and that's fine. Now I'm just going to learn as much as I can from them. And this change in mentality and losing my ego accelerated my growth like never before. I slowly started to learn from them and use their techniques against them or play better with my own teammates. I was asking them questions all the time and using them as resources. Most of the players were incredibly nice about helping me. It turns out they loved helping others improve, and they were never judging me at any point, even though that was the story I was always hearing in my own head every time they killed me. Many of them actually commended me for sticking through it and doing my best, and they noticed my growth. This was probably the biggest leap in gaming skill I ever had. Later on, I was actually offered to play on a semi-pro team sponsored by Dr. Pepper. I personally found the rigorous practice schedule to be too much during that time, so I didn't accept. But maybe that goes to show you what losing the ego and taking on a growth mindset can do for you. Now, if you still can't find any specific issues to work on, it might be that you're too novice at the game to realize your mistakes, and that is okay. Or if you're an experienced player and you still don't know what to work on, that's fine, because there are always a few things you can always improve on. At this point, I highly recommend looking at the fundamentals of the game you play and thinking about what skills always have the biggest impact on success in the game. For shooters, I would suggest something like aim. Aim is a determining factor in every single fight, so it's really one of those things you should be putting a lot of effort into improving at. You can be a pretty bad player in most skills of a shooter, but still get away with winning often if you have great aim. Other fundamental skills to consider inside of shooters might be movement, using cover well, or positioning. Now, it's important to try to get as specific and narrow about your issues as you reasonably can. So if your aim is bad, try to determine if it's only close range shotgun fights, or maybe just tracking players players at farther ranges. Knowing what type of aim to work on can help you improve faster. Okay, now that we've determined a single weakness or skill to work on, we have to come up with a way to train it. The more focused the training of that skill is, the better. NBA players aiming to improve their three-point shooting don't just play full-court basketball games. Instead, they spend hundreds of hours on specific three-point shooting drills, and we should apply the same mindset when designing our training scenarios as well. Designing a training scenario or a drill will require a bit of creativity because it's not one size fits all. For instance, if you're just wanting to work on your aim trainers are undoubtedly the best way to do that. But if you're being more specific and you feel like your shotgun aim is bad, that type of aim is considered flicking. So you'd get into an aim trainer like Aim Labs, Kovacs, or Aim Beast and start working on flicking scenarios, alongside other scenarios that mimic your game's aim mechanics. Now, just a note, I believe dedicated aim trainers are almost always superior to in-game aim training because they really challenge you and allow you to track your progress and see your weaknesses. Very rarely have I ever felt challenged or frustrated by in-game aim trainers. Okay, say we want to work on a certain type of movement in a shooter game such as Fortnite. We'd have to identify what the movement is first. Let's say it's a slide shot move where we jump, land into a slide, and shoot an enemy while sliding. And we may have figured this move out by watching a better player's gameplay in slow motion. This move would be best practiced in custom creative lobbies. Preferably you'd start in a training map like Shinobi Training Grounds, map code in the description below, and practice the move against bots over and over again. Then, once you're comfortable with it, you'd move to a multiplayer lobby in creative and try to force yourself to use this move in almost every single fight. Keep practicing and experimenting with it until you find the best scenarios to use that move. If you want to practice something like using cover better, you could play a creative map like Shinobi Realistic FFA, map code below, and just play the outskirts of the map and force people to push towards you while you use cover as effectively as possible and take the least amount of damage in the fight. Spoiler, you probably won't win very many rounds doing this type of training, but you will learn a lot more and get a lot better at the game if you practice these things with intent. Overall, you'll have to find the most efficient way to get the most repetitions of an action until it becomes muscle memory and natural in real game scenarios. Also, you'll learn what conditions this action works best in. You keep doing this with each individual skill that you're weak in, one at a time, and you'll find that you're gaining skills much faster than you ever have before. Now, I highly recommend scheduling out your practice time before or after playing. If you just jump on your favorite game and meet up with your friends and start running games, you won't find the time to practice with intent and you'll continue to improve at a snail's pace. You might even need to let your friends know that from now on, you're going to practice a skill for 30 minutes before playing. Hey, and maybe they'll have interest in taking part too. Training with a friend can actually be really effective because you can give each other feedback while trying to learn the skill. Just keep in mind that you might not get the same level of focus or as many repetitions as practicing alone. I hope this video was helpful. If you like this type of video, I encourage you to check out my must-watch playlist for Fortnite Zero Build or my holistic gaming guides playlist. I promise you won't regret it. And if you haven't smashed that like button yet, please do it now. And if you've somehow endured this video to get this far, drop a comment with the word Raiden below so I know you're a real one. Best of luck on your improvement journey, my friend. Shinobi out.